guys, coming at you with yet another ARC review. So thank you to Edelweiss and the publisher for my free advanced review copy. I have gone a little bit out of my comfort zone today, and I am not reviewing a second chance romance, by which I'm sure you are so shocked. The book in question is called You Had Me at Happy Hour by Timothy Janowski. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Timothy has written a bunch of other books. I have not read any of them, so You Had Me at Happy Hour is my first time reading his work, and I'm a little bit on the fence about it, and we're gonna talk about it. First of all, I just kind of want to read you the tagline, because we'll start there and kind of where my expectations were with this book and then what actually happened. So the tagline, like, you know, the one sentence blurb is, in this sexy, emotionally satisfying LGBTQIA plus romance, a grumpy sommelier and a flirty mixologist just might be the perfect pairing. Rivalry never tasted so good. So what I thought I was getting was kind of like an opposites attract, grumpy sunshine, like enemies to lovers situation. It was some of that. It wasn't all of that in the way that I expected. But so this story opens up with one of the POVs of the romance pairing in this book. So Julian is a waiter and sommelier at his aunt and uncle's restaurant called Martin's Place. And Martin's Place is unfortunately not doing really well, and Julian is kind of really conflicted about that because he needs it to be doing really well so that he can fund his own dreams, which are to become a master sommelier. And if you don't know what that is, or anything really about it, that is the title of people who are like these expert wine tasters and pairers. And this is a very true fact that at the like highest level of this certification, there's only like a few hundred of them in the world or less. I'm not entirely certain. I did not look up the actual statistics. But so what Julian is trying to achieve is very very high ranking and very hard to do, and it costs a lot of money. So because the restaurant's not doing so well, Julian's aunt and uncle decide to fill a open bartending position with a fairly trendy, famous TikToker named Greg Harlow. His handle on TikTok is Good With His Hands Harlow. And so basically Julian's like, oh, we're getting like this super flirty, rich New York bartender to come work at this place, not really like thinking too hard about why a trendy, famous, rich New York City area bartender would move to this like not doing so well bar in Pennsylvania. Some things to know about Julian. Julian has OCD and a ton of parental trauma. When he was young, his parents, they were alcoholics, and he was in a car accident with his mom when she was drunk driving. They were both fine, but obviously this caused a lot of issues for Julian around alcohol and around driving. And at that point, Child Protective Services was called, and he was taken away from his parents and placed with his aunt and uncle, who he has then grown up with. So Julian is a little bit of a conundrum. He wants to be a very famous wine person. He's very passionate about wine, but he actually doesn't drink. When he tastes wine, he just swills and spits it out. He does not drink at all because he doesn't want to end up like his parents. Greg, we will come to find, is a similar conundrum. What he puts out on TikTok is only a facade, as that oftentimes is the case, and he has run up a lot of credit card debt. He is no longer as trending as he used to be, and so he sees this bar in Pennsylvania as a time to move back in with his cousin Rufus, reconnect with some family, and hopefully start to pay off that credit card debt. From the moment that Greg starts at Martin's Place, though, it just does not go well. They don't hit it off, but what I don't think that, like I said, that blurb really tells you, like, they make it seem like a rivalry, and really it's just from the moment kind of a lot of miscommunication. But Greg is very quick to kind of notice that Julian is clearly neurodiverse, even if Greg doesn't know quite what flavor of neurodiverse he is. He has that on his radar. Also because Greg takes medication for an anxiety disorder. So it's kind of like one of those things that we neurodiverse people do when we walk in a room and go, "Aye, sus." So it's not really a rivalry. It's mostly just Julian is very, very awkward in his interactions with people. He doesn't like change. And so Greg coming in and changing up the drink menu, changing up the vibe of Martin's place, it's all just like very difficult for him to process. And also they're both wildly attracted to each other physically, so that's like a whole other level. Because of their inability to interact with each other, Julian's aunt and uncle say that unless they want to be let go, they have to start hosting happy hours. And so they do Wind Down Wednesdays and mixed drink themed Thursday, and they are in charge of planning those together. And when the two of them are thrown together to do those plannings, they kind of realize there's more to meets the eye. And basically at this point, they're not overcoming any rivalry or anything. They're basically just like, particularly on Julian's end, like learning how to effectively communicate with Greg, and Greg is learning how to effectively communicate with Julian and his like particular neurodiversities that will help him understand where Greg is coming from and vice versa. I also read that blurb because it uses the phrase emotionally intelligent, and I actually just used that phrase in my review from last week where I gave The X-Files by Jessica Joyce 5 stars. And I have a very conflicting feeling about the use of that phrase in relation to this book. And the reason is because, yes, I do believe that it is emotionally intelligent in the way that it talks about neurodiversity, medication, trauma, feelings. Like I said, Julian has OCD, and it's really hard for him to like navigate the world with people who aren't willing to, you know, lend a hand and understand. Sometimes he just needs things to be a certain way. And this is both in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom. And as that will come up as Julian and Greg's relationship progresses. And Greg's character offers a very vulnerable discussion about how when you are on anxiety medication, it can cause issues with ED or erectile dysfunction. And so Greg's previous partner in New York City, among all the other things that blew up, basically broke up with him because Greg went on this medication and it affected their sex life. And so Greg is very vulnerable about getting back into a sexual relationship with someone because he's not sure if he's going to be, someone put their hand out and say, "I understand you, I'm willing to work with this," etc. And so in particular, when Greg and Julian, get closer and come together, they have to navigate both of those realities in the bedroom. And so while the scenes are very, very spicy, they also do have those very vulnerable, trusting conversations of like, this is what I need in this situation, and how to give the other person confidence and trust and all of those things that are needed to make those interactions pleasurable for everyone. You also find out as the story goes on that Greg himself has some parental issues that he is working through, and I don't want to get into all of it, but there's like a lot going on in a book that is not even 300 pages long in terms of what each character is dealing with individually and how they negotiate that as they become closer. And then there's the inevitable 75% of the way through where you're like, "Oh, guys, really?" And then they have to kind of deal with that as well, and it's, that whole thing. The reason that I have an issue calling this emotionally intelligent is while all of that is handled really, really well, I think in this particular case, it is at a disservice to the characters themselves. There is so much discussion and negotiation and all that type of stuff that while I really appreciated all of the different types of discussion and representation, I never really felt deeply attached to any of the characters. It kind of felt like one of those books where, you're learning about some of these other issues that people who have either like general anxiety disorder or OCD have, and you're learning to care about those things through these characters. You definitely do care about the characters going through those things, but in terms of a romance novel where I felt very invested in the characters themselves and their relationship and what was going on at Martin's place, because to be losing a family business, right? Like, I grew up in a family restaurant, so I kind of thought, well, at least that part of this will be really emotionally connective for me. But it was just so much like in the background of all of this stuff going on that I was just never really able to like connect to that part of the plot, or Julian or Greg or any of the other background characters. So the book was really batting 500 for me, which is that I really appreciated how well this whole part of the book was handled, but on a general writing level, I just really wasn't attached to it very much. So it's like, it's such a hard book to review, because on the one hand, I would love to give this to people for the rep that is within it, the representation of, you know, sexuality and neurodiversity and anxiety and like all this stuff. But as a romance novel, it just really didn't get to me in the ways that I as a reader wanted it to. So in that sense, I don't even know like what to tell you guys, right? Like my entire job is as a book reviewer and to kind of give you a sense of, you know, should you read this book or shouldn't you read this book? And I suppose it just depends on what you are interested in a book. Obviously, the choice is always up to you, and things that I don't like might mean that it would make it a great book for you and vice versa. But like, I feel so on the fence about this book, about saying, yes, do go read it, or like, it's a pretty like 3-star book and you can read it if you want to, or you can just pass. Because to be clear, it's not a bad book. It's just, as a romance novel, fine. As a rep novel, it's really great. It's very emotionally intelligent. That bit's not a lie. But I wanted it to do both of those things, and it didn't. So I know I always say at the end of these reviews, like, you make your own decisions, you do you. And in this case, I like really mean it, because I cannot even decide on which side of the do recommend, don't recommend, or just meh recommend, like equation that I fall down on. I don't know. This book is like a conundrum in my mind. So all I can do is tell you why it's like such a confusing book for me, what I didn't like about it. As an ARC review, this book will not be out exactly the day of that this review comes out, but it will be out shortly within the next couple of days, so you can put it on hold at your local library or get it from your local bookstore. As I mentioned, Timothy does have other books that have been published, a whole handful of them. So you could potentially go and try out one of those and see if this is a writing style that you're interested in. If you have read some of Timothy's other books, I would love to know if this is kind of like a trend, or if this is maybe like an off book. Like that happens, right? Where sometimes a book just doesn't hit everything the author usually does. So I would love to hear from you if that's the case as well. Let me know any of that down in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.